People of Reddit who have interacted with or met a serial killer or had a close call. How was the exchange, what happened, and years or weeks whatever, what was your reaction to seeing them on the news?
Silent scan.
When I was 7, a man knocked on our door at about 8:30 at night. My mom and I were in the living room watching TV. My mom answered the door, and he said something about selling newspapers. She said she wasn't interested, and as she tried to close the door he tried to force his way inside. She always had the chain latch on, and she kicked the door closed on his arm as he tried to grab for her. He ran away and she called the police. About a year later Cleophas Prince Jr. was arrested for killing 6 women, mostly in our neighborhood. My mom recognized him as the man who tried to force his way in that night.
Silent scan.
My dad met Charlie Manson at a motorcycle shop, if I remember right, in Venice Beach in the 60s. Said he remembered a really short, my dad's a foot taller, creepy dude with scary eyes. Didn't think anything of it until he turned up on the news. My mom met him in Venice as well. She told me he was charming. She met him at a party briefly and was shocked when he was arrested. Someone's mom almost joined a murder cult.
Silent scan.
My grandmother was a neighbor to John Wayne Gacy for a brief time. My mother used to talk about a photo they had with him completely unaware of what was going on. Of course after his conviction they were floored. That is eerily creepy, and was it the house or in a different neighborhood they were neighbors.
Silent scan.
I went to the same church as BTK. He was always very nice, polite, and helpful. I remember how shocked my family was when he was arrested. He had such a firm handshake. Yeah, I heard he was very nice from the documentaries, and then if you fit his tastes or fetish that is another story. I've met so many people in the Park City area who have had a creepy encounter with him. My friend's aunt was one of the women who got away. She heard the window break in the living room, and saw a hand reaching through to unlock the door. She ran away and then moved out of Kansas permanently.
Silent scan.
Not me, but my aunt. She was a judicial assistant in Florida back in the 1980s. One day, 3 well-dressed men came to see the judge. One was particularly good-looking and charming and really chatted her up. She found out later that she had been chatted up by Ted Bundy. Well, from what I heard he was a smooth talker, but behind closed doors he was a demon, so not surprising to hear he would try to do that.
Silent scan.
I have met 2 while sitting in jail in lockdown protected custody. One was a convicted axe murderer who was waiting on a retrial as the evidence and testimony against him was in question. He was a decent guy as long as you didn't piss him off by changing the channel when football was on, or do anything stupid like singing or kicking the doors at night. He even cut my hair for me when we got the clippers. I remember he had Project Innocence lawyers, so he might not actually be one, who knows. His name was Sherwood Brown. The second one was just crazy. He threw all his discovery papers out of the beanhole of his cell, and they included pictures of his victims. He would try to sell dry deodorant from the state issue as drugs, and was supposedly willing to tell people where he buried the bodies to snitch on him, but it sounded like a con, and I avoided talking to him out on rec. From what I remember he was sitting in jail for a murder in Mississippi and was just waiting on a transfer. I don't remember his name as I avoided talking to him. You are brave to get a haircut from the axe murderer.
Silent scan.
When I was 13, I was living on the streets of Lake Elsinore, California, and had a lady looking after me that was a druggie and a H-cur. She had a John that really liked her and invited us to his place once. He was a real weird-ass beast-stard. A year later she turned up dead with a whole bunch of other working girls in the area, killed by the I-15 strangler. When they caught the guy I instantly recognized him as the John. His name was William Lester Suff, and the trailer that he took us to was his kill shack.
Silent scan.
So many people's aunts went on dates with Ted Bundy on this thread. That guy must have been seeing a different aunt every night. I was thinking that everybody's auntie met Ted Bundy.
Silent scan.
Elizabeth Wettlaufer was my dad's nurse. She disappeared, saw her on the news about 3 months later, led away in handcuffs for killing several seniors over a period of years. Reaction. Holy SHT. Then checking dates of when she was still working, and my dad's date of death, about a month later. Exchanges with her never raised any red flags, just typical visitor-nurse talk. I remember seeing this real-life scary story where this kid named Mitchell's mom was dating her. I think married, I don't know. They went to a wedding and for some reason Wettlaufer came in tie-dye and jeans. There was shrimp at the wedding, and Mitchell loved it, but her mother warned him not to eat it because it was fried in peanut oil. Wettlaufer came over to him with shrimp and said it was brought by a guest who cooked it with canola oil. Nope. After the incident, Mitchell told his mom it was Wettlaufer's fault, and she luckily believed him. They broke up. Months later, they get the news.
Silent scan.
Not me, but my best buddy's older brother lived off the grid in northern Yukon in the 70s. Comes home to Edmonton once every couple of years. Due to terrible gravel and dirt roads back then it is a 4-day drive. Starting his journey one time he picks up a hitchhiker. It's the code of the north, people help each other. They hit it off, and the Hetcher even helps out with the driving duties. One time when the Hetcher was sleeping, my buddy's brother hears on the radio a police alert about a multiple murder in the area. He matches the description of the Hetcher. As they are still in the middle of nowhere, he turns off the radio, and he ends up staying with the guy for 2 more days. When they finally got into a populated area, they stopped at a diner, and he called the cops. Provincial cops did a traffic stop 30 minutes later and got the guy. He had killed his wife, kid, and her parents.
Silent scan.
I had a regular customer at my shop who would come in and buy cigarettes and beer after his shift. He was friendly and polite enough, helped us to catch a shoplifter on one occasion, however did like to stare a little too much at one of my colleagues. Then a young woman goes missing in my town. It was all over the news as it was completely out of character for her. There was ribbons scattered in trees and lampposts all over. One day they pull a body out of the river, and it was identified as this young woman. Her family was devastated. A few days later they announced the name of a man they wanted to speak to who had been spotted in a local shop buying cigarettes and beer, and later on CCTV, trying to talk to her in a park. However, he hanged himself and was found dead in a local park a few days later. It was the customer. The shop footage they showed was from my shop. The cashier had been blurred, so we have no way of knowing who served him that time, but it gives me the creeps just thinking about it. I have a creepy story similar to yours. When I was born, my dad struck up a friendship with the doctor who numbed my mom up real good. 14 years later, he takes my dad and stepmom out with his wife to drink. My family drinks a bunch, and never hears from them again. My dad thought they freaked them out. Turns out the doctor and his wife were sex trafficking women in from Thailand, and had just been caught by the authorities. Freaked the hell out of my mom, knowing that that monster was her doctor.
Silent scan.
Back in the 40s, my grandparents were on vacation down in Florida. One day they were at a cafe, and a man approached them recognizing their Chicago accents, and asked if he could eat with them, being a Chicago native himself. They had a great time chatting and ended up talking for an hour or two. When they were departing they realized proper introductions had never been done and promptly introduced themselves. The response: Al Capone, it's been great talking with you too, not exactly a serial killer, but certainly responsible for many deaths, and too good of a story to pass up. My husband's great aunt was Al's manicurist at the Lexington Hotel. Said he was a good tipper and wouldn't let the boys use bad language around the women.
Silent scan.
My teen sister and her girlfriend started hanging out with these slightly older guys that brutally murdered a young couple from our neighborhood within days of knowing them. I mean, they tortured the girl lessfully, mutilated her, stuff I don't even want to recount. I feel like my sister dodged a bullet there for sure. The perpetrators ended up being the first to be executed under the South Carolina's reauthorizing of the death penalty in our state.
Silent scan.
I grew up next to a family whose eldest daughter dated the brother of Luke Ferguson, who wasn't a serial killer, but was a murderer and a psychopath. He's since killed an inmate since being in jail for his original murder. There was a big empty lot on our street where everyone in the neighborhood would play baseball, and we always hated it when Luke would come. Guy was such a DK, always whining and trying to bully everyone else. My buddy Patrick took 2 beaners from him one day when he was pitching, and after the second one charged him with the baseball bat. Luke stopped coming around after that. Some years later we see him on the news sitting on a damn John Deere tractor being interviewed about his neighbor's murder, saying, "Oh, it's a horrible tragedy," only to find out 2 days later he was the one who did it. None of us were shocked. Patrick texted me that night and said, I should have ran his fat SS down and launched his skull across the street.
Silent scan.
Holy SHT. I took a job in Wichita, Kansas from another state. While we were looking for a place to live, we stopped at a house for sale in Park City, which is a suburb of Wichita. As me and the missus got out to look at the house, the neighbor across the street was outside, so I walked over and asked him about the neighborhood. He seemed friendly enough. After talking for about 10 minutes we got back in the car. My wife immediately said that guy has crazy in his eyes. We didn't buy that house, but a couple years later the BTK killer was apprehended, and it was FCKING Dennis Rader, the BTK killer that we were talking to. We would have lived directly across the street from a serial killer. They have since bulldozed his house and it no longer exists, but man, you talk about freaky.
Silent scan.
My mother used to carpool with Jerry Brudos. They worked at the same electronics company, and she fit his victim's profile. This was several years before I was born. They have since bulldozed his house and it no longer exists, but man, you talk about freaky. Good that your mother didn't end up a victim. It seems, since she was familiar with him, that she probably wasn't marked for a victim because he targeted strangers. Wow, what a scary thing. Did your mom ever talk about him? Did he seem like a normal guy during the carpools to work? Any info would be interesting to learn, thanks. She never talked about him outside of their recounting this story a few times over the years. If I asked her about it, all she ever said was, "Yep, it's true, I carpooled with that guy." From what I remember her saying, he seemed normal and unassuming to her. My other family members told me more about the details of what happened to his victims than my mom ever did. I think because the details were pretty grisly and I was about 10 years old when I found out about it. My sister liked telling people the story. I remember my mom telling me that he found one of his victims at Lloyd's Center, which is a mall in Portland she knew I was familiar with. I had a stranger randomly ask me once if I knew who Jerry Brudos was. I was like, yep.
Silent scan.
This person only killed one person. But he was very quiet at work. We being a gregarious group were always trying to get him to talk. One weekend he went home and killed our CEO's at the time daughter, practically beheading her, and left her infant son in the bed with her body. Saw it on the news afterwards, and jaw on the floor is a complete understatement.
Silent scan.
My grandma went on a date with Ted Bundy and was supposed to go home with him, but she wanted him to meet her parents first. Luckily when she said that he met them, and she was never killed. When I found out that she went on a date with Ted Bundy, it was right after I watched a documentary on him, and I was like, oh my god, I didn't even know what to say. Understatement of the year.
Silent scan.
My great aunt used to work in a prison as a guard. She met Myra Hindley, Ian Brady's girlfriend who lured children for them to kill. Apparently she was very proud of what she did. She said to my aunt, do you know who I am? I'm Myra Hindley. And my aunt just locked the door and said, well, I'm my aunt's name, and walked away. She also met the Suffolk Strangler and remarked at how short he was.
Silent scan.